thank you, it's Candy Arlen, so I was going to correct that, but thank you. I'm at 231 Chipaway Drive in Gallatin, and first of all, I want to thank everyone who is here from the ad hoc committee, from the commissioners, from Team Shelter USA. I can't thank you all enough. 8 months ago, I think, when we started this, I don't believe we ever would have thought that we would have gotten to this point. So I am so pleased that we are here and that Team Shelter has come in to help with the community's concerns. One thing about Sumner County is we are a growing population, and I think we found from the turnout that we've had over the past few months that population is very concerned about the welfare of the animals in our county. So I think that this is going to be just an ongoing thing that everyone is concerned about. And I just want to thank everyone for what we've seen as an uptick in the communications with the public. That has improved tremendously, and we really hope that we can keep that kind of momentum going even after Team Shelter has left. I think we've got some really good momentum, so much that I'm thankful for. I'm hoping that the ad hoc committee and the commissioners at large will consider some of the things that are found and will take them to heart, including some of the inefficiencies we have with the current use of prison labor and how the funding overall is used. So just want to make sure that that's out there as well. So, and the other thing that I would like to say is I'm hoping that the rescue community and the community at large can continue to work together. I believe some of the communication that has come out of this journey we've all been on really has helped with that, and I'm hopeful that will continue. So my last thing would be that I'm hoping that the ad hoc committee, the commissioners at large, when this is all said and done, will consider the current structure and the funding and how to put animal care into animal control. And that would be, that we have a new vision as we go into 2024 and further on in the decade. So thank you, everybody. Again, I cannot stress enough how happy I am that this has all happened, and thanks to the commission, the ad hoc committee, and especially the Team Shelter USA.
Hayne Garner, Murray John Stone, did I say it right?
And Harry.
I hope you humour me this evening. My name is Enharrod
Irving Jones Phillips, 182 Clifftop Drive, Hendersonville. I do want to talk about animals, but not necessarily the agenda items, if you don't mind humouring me for 2 minutes. I've come here tonight to kindly ask for there to be a change in Sumner County with regard to chaining a dog in one's backyard. In 2017, in the United Arab Emirates, where I lived, I founded, set up, and volunteered at an animal rescue and welfare organisation, a not-for-profit, to help mainly abandoned dogs. I rescued many dogs, and over the years, the organisation rescued thousands of dogs, particularly from very bad situations, but none of them were ever chained. And this is quite surprising. You would think in a third world Arab Islamic country that sometimes cruelty would be a mass and they would be chaining dogs, but I never did rescue a dog that had been chained. Chaining a dog for life is a practice I have only ever seen in Afghanistan, practiced by the Taliban. I never ever thought that Americans, us, and the Taliban had anything in common until now, as dramatic and unthinkable as that may sound. This is a medieval human practice that I would like to stop immediately, and I wish to work with you all on this. In addition, the criteria for providing suitable dwelling for a dog during inclement weather is unclear and open to interpretation, and sadly, it is unenforced. Again, I wish to change this. To me, these two practices are cruel, And when I think of all the other advancements that we have developed as a superpower, I am saddened that we have not been able to advance in this area. Cruelty is not something we can eradicate, but I'm hopeful that together we can look into meaningful ways that this community can reduce cruel practices, which I believe chaining a dog for life is. Finally, I wish to expand this discussion with you and hope that Chairman Jones and all of you can facilitate this, if appropriate. And if it's not appropriate, perhaps you can point me in the direction who can help me on this matter. Thank you.
Mary Caledonia?
Hi, I actually had questions which can't be answered right now before the meeting, but I would like to know, hopefully we can discuss it, how we can increase the adoptions at Animal Can Control. Hoping that we can get the website up and running with photos. I'm hoping that maybe we can even have a truck go to festivals and street fairs with animals up for adoption and get them out in the general population and have people really see what kind of animals are up for adoption and hopefully get them adopted. Also, is there a way, or how do we increase the funds that they're currently getting now? Since Gallatin has been populated so much now, there's going to be more people, which mean more animals, and I'm hoping that the state will increase their funding for animal can control. Thank you.
That concludes public recognition. I'm going to hand over the meeting to Chairman Jones. He's here now.
Thank you for taking care of that, Commissioner Jerome. Sorry I'm late to the rest of the public, traffic in Nashville. There is no report of the chair and old business. We're going to continue next month some of the discussions we had during last month. But for now, we're going to go into the discussion from the results from Team Shelter of the animal control facility yesterday. So with, I'd entertain a motion to suspend the rules so we can hear from Dr. Pisano.
I'll motion to suspend rules.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, I'm going to give the floor to you. I'll just let you take it from here. And periodically, if we have questions, would you like us to ask as they come up, or try to take notes and save them to the end? Which would you prefer?
Thank you so much. Why don't I give a 10-minute or so overview, and then we can open it up for questions. Does that sound like a good idea?
Well, I was going to wait for it to come on red again, but
I don't think it will, there's somebody doing
So just to be clear, yeah, that'll be fine, but just for the public, that's question and answer time for us. This is a regular meeting now. It's not going to be like Tuesday night's meeting. So you guys feel free to take notes and you can ask questions afterwards.
Oh, okay, then maybe I'll go 15 minutes.
Okay.
I go 15 minutes, 15 hours. So my name is Dr. Sarah Pisano, and I am with Team Shelter USA, so thank you for the accolades, but I'm part of a very big team. It's Maddie's A Million Pet Challenge, so please tag at Maddie's Fund and Maddie's Million Pet Challenge to thank them for funding this consult. We have been here and been working with your community and will continue to work with your community, all pro bono, thanks to Maddie's. Cameron Moore is here. Our other partner is the University of Florida, soon to be Dr. Myra, fourth-year veterinary student. Tell her how great it is to live here because you need veterinarians in your community. But in any event, I want to first thank Chief Craddock and the ad hoc committee coincidentally reached out to me in the same week. So I knew it was meant to be that we should be here. If you could raise your hand if you were either here Tuesday night or listened to the presentation, or actually, yeah, if you were here. Okay, so almost everybody. So if you did not hear the presentation yet, please go back. And Commissioner, could you tell people where they can listen to the presentation?
Yeah, it's available on YouTube. The link is on my page from Tuesday night's meeting. If you go to Tim Jones County Commissioner District 23, the link is posted as probably the second post you'll see, tonight's post and then Tuesday night's post. That'd be the easiest, quickest way to get to it probably, because I don't know the YouTube link off the top of my head.
So please listen to that, share the link so that anybody interested in animal welfare can listen, because it's always important to us that our recommendations are heard in the context of everything we're recommending. Sometimes when things are taken out of context, people have a misunderstanding of the points that we are trying to make. But we are a team that's been on the road nationally for 11 years, and that is because we started working and looking at shelters who needed help based on what was happening in other successful animal welfare programs, municipal shelters run by law enforcement or municipalities like counties or cities, or run by nonprofits, or some sort of blend. And when we started, we looked at who is euthanizing the most animals. That's where we're going to go, because that's where we know we can make the biggest difference. And quite honestly, when we started, we thought, well, we're going to share these ideas, but we're funded to travel there, but we don't have money to give these shelters, so we're just going to hope for the best and cross our fingers. And what happened next was so incredibly humbling to me, to make recommendations and say to shelters, hey, try this safety net idea. That means I'm not going to blindly allow animals to come into the shelter. I'm going to have conversation with people, whether I'm a field officer, whether I'm at the front desk, at intake. Hey, what's going on? What is the situation with this pet? Is this your pet? Are you having trouble with some specific issue? Could it possibly be a temporary issue? And once we started telling shelters to try this, our star pupil happens to be Sheriff Ivy at the Brevard Sheriff's Office in Brevard, Florida. He is an elected sheriff, and he said, I really don't want to do that because I want everyone to love me, I don't want people to get mad. And we said, do us a favor and just try it. One intake person was the same intake person that instead of signing animals in blindly said, what can I do to help you keep or maybe place your pet on your own? And we said, gosh, if you help any animals 10%, 30%, that's going to be amazing. So imagine our surprise when year one, the same intake person with no increase in budget, no increase in staff, no increase of other resources, helped 80% of those owner surrenders in ways that did not result in a shelter intake. We almost fell off our chair. So, people kept calling us to come in, and we're like, holy cow, it really works, And it's exciting to stand before you to say, we're not saying, hey, Sumner County, try this crazy idea, and let's see if it works here. It's quite the opposite. When you design the program appropriately, we 100% guarantee it will work. We worked with another shelter recently, a nonprofit with a county contract, and they had a great community solutions program, but guess what? They weren't applying it at their shelter, it was in the community. We said that community solutions should be over intake, and out of the gate, 50% of the pets were helped in ways other than shelter intake. So this is about us releasing judgment, like I used to judge people. I never asked when I was public shelter director what I could do to help you. I was just busy being mad at you for thinking you were a rotten person for surrendering your pet to a shelter. So once we have conversation and understand that these are people, for the most part, we're not going to win everyone over, we're not going to help 100% of them, but most people want to help their pets in other ways, but they didn't have that knowledge or access or link. So that's where we come in. I talked about home to home. This is one of our basic recommendations. So the point is that what we're telling you is simply, we're the messenger, because we're saying organizations, shelters, bigger than yours, smaller than yours, all of these things matter and all of these things work. So we never, you notice the order with which I speak, I never start with adoptions. I start with safety net. I start with making sure we're exhausting all those other options instead of a shelter intake, because that's always hard, difficult, stressful, frustrating, and anxiety-driven, or produces a lot of anxiety in people and animals. So that's the first step. Linked in with that safety net, we always look at public policy, so thank you for bringing up tethering. And we look at your state law for sure, but more importantly, your local ordinances to make recommendations, to make sure they're in line with best practices. When I started at my shelter as a public director, they hadn't been looked at in 30 years. So there is always opportunity for us to make sure our elected officials are educated about the most efficient and best public policy that benefits animals and people, that provides for public and animal safety. So as we traveled to all these communities, what we found was the solutions were the same, and we were writing the same report. So this is the book that I talked about the other night. It's the Best Practice Playbook for Animal Shelters. Thousands have been sold. Most shelters have this book, many veterinary school libraries. It's available on Amazon as a hard copy and as an ebook. And there's a chapter on legislation, what to do and what not to do. And so what the ask is of the ad hoc committee and commissioners is to provide us, which we couldn't find, is Word documents for your local ordinances, because we've worked with animal welfare attorneys for years. What I do is redline the recommendations right in there, and then we speak to your municipal attorneys, to your county and your city's attorneys, and explain to them why these are best practice ordinances. And their job then is to say, okay, yes, it's legally sufficient, and yes, it is in line with state statute, right? Because we could be more strict but not more lax than your state statute. So that's really important, because these are foundational issues. And I think I shared with you the other night, I do what I do because for decades I was suffering in the symptoms of a broken system that is the traditional flawed system of animal control and sheltering. This is a 120-year-old system that was not designed for how we live with animals today. So that's very important. Part of safety net, spay-neuter, targeted spay-neuter. Municipalities must recognize that the investment in spay-neuter saves everybody. It decreases shelter intake. Your own amazing Sumner spay-neuter clinic here has the documentation. I showed those charts the other day. I showed the inverse correlation between targeted spay neuter and decreasing intake and euthanasia. And guess what? Kudos to your spay neuter clinic because you have the same exact graph. So yes, you have the same graph. What you don't have is municipal backing with funding that actually benefits the municipalities. When municipalities sponsor targeted spay neuter, enforcement costs decrease and shelter intake decreases. So it saves you on the other side. It saves your workload, and it is certainly beneficial to animals not going into shelter, and it's beneficial to all of us, right? So those are all things that we are recommending and will continue to work with your sheriff's office on those specific recommendations. And before I get a little deeper into moving through those recommendations at a high level, what this will look like moving forward. Again, we're here pro bono here on site, and that's included with this program. We do not typically come back in person. The rest of the assistance happens virtually, phone calls, meetings, texts. However, we can link your organizations, whether you're a nonprofit here or you're the sheriff's office, with resources. We are a very connected team. I stopped counting after $5 or $6 million that we've helped shelters get. It maybe is, much higher than that, but we are effective networkers. Even though we are not the ones writing the check, funders call us. And they say, hey, we know you were in Sumner County, tell us about it. Who needs help? Should we fund this? So we will be doing that ongoing. And this program is officially 1 year, but we never really get rid of anybody, so you can't get rid of us. So within the next several weeks, we will submit a report to Chief Craddock, and we will be working directly with the Sheriff's Office on prioritizing and implementing and helping implement these recommendations, some of which are super easy and really just policy changes and things that can be done with no additional resources. Others will take maybe more funding or different steps to get to, but just know that we will be continuing to work with your sheriff's office and with your ad hoc committee. But the first step is to work with the office directly, and we've already learned so much about your shelter, but there's still some more analysis that we'll be doing moving forward in the next few days. We don't have a formal schedule of follow-up. We always want to speak to the stakeholders about the report recommendations, which there's no surprises. You're going to find everything in here. No shocking revelations, but we do want to meet with your sheriff's leaders so that we can make sure that everything is very clear, and there's maybe other things that we didn't learn about that we need to comment on or make recommendations about. We were fortunate to have also the UT Shelter Medicine team here, and they will be coming back to portalize cages. They're doing this pro bono. They're providing the portals for the cat cages, which gives the cats the ample amount of room when they're confined in your shelter. I was also invited back in July to do a presentation, much like the one that was done on Tuesday. So you will be hearing that. The Animal Animal Rescue Corps ARC is going to be sponsoring my trip back. So that will be happening in July, and you will be hearing that through some different social media channels. So we'll keep the Sheriff's Office and the Ad Hoc Committee informed about that. So, and I'm excited that we get to come, or I get to come back in July. So again, I cannot stress that we all need to be obsessed about keeping animals out of shelters. That's because it is never a home when they are confined. It is never a home when they're in a shelter, as hard as we all work. And I wanted to tell you some good news. We also, my team we don't transport animals, we don't, do rescue pleas, we don't do any of that stuff, but guess what? Our team that did that today, and Cameron and Mariah drove 8 cats to Nashville Humane today, so please give them a round of applause. So the UT team wanted to join us. Dr. Becky was with us. We're like, excellent. So she did medical rounds. She treated several animals. Thank you to Sarah for giving some vaccines today, so we were able to make sure that there were more animals vaccinated that could be moved up to adoption. So even though that's out of our official job, we really try to pitch in whenever we can. So think about what that might look like for your shelter. When we did exhaust all those opportunities, we can promise you, out of the gate, you will absolutely have a 40% decrease in shelter intake immediately. What we're seeing as communities increase the population, we work in a lot of communities where there's people population explosion, we are not seeing more animals in the shelters as a result. There's several reasons for that, but again, the organizations who have that focus on community programs and safety net are the ones that are decreasing intake no matter what their people population is. And you are fortunate in your community, you have a very low poverty, lower than the national average. So that's good to hear as well, but there's certainly plenty of people, pet owners in need, far beyond just people living in poverty, we know that. So once animals enter the shelter, we want to make sure from the moment of intake, first of all, they're vaccinated and dewormed, they get flea control, especially in the summer months, and those things are the basics. But from that point, that's when we have to start advocating for their placement or for their final disposition, which if this is a large unsafe community or a large unsafe dog, then euthanasia is the right outcome for that dog. If there is a medical case beyond all of our resources, euthanasia is the right outcome, and it has to happen sooner than later. We see a lot of shelters over capacity because they want to work with an aggressive dog, or they don't believe that the 3 bites were the dog's fault, or they're waiting for that magic home, right, or placement. So just please keep that in mind and be supportive of the right euthanasias. That ends up being a very small percentage of the animals that would enter your shelter. The rest of them, we want to focus on the shortest length of stay. So for your shelter, we've identified lots of ways that can happen. So when you vaccinate them on intake, they should be in the adoption areas so that people can see them. Their presence should be online, right? It's 2024. Everybody's looking at their phone. Everybody's going online to adopt. So those are things that need to happen. We also know that you have shelters all around you that could help with placement, but we can't be passive about that because they are in demand. They don't need to look for animals, but we need to have a relationship with them and make sure that we're advocating to get animals out quickly. We also love when there are off-site adoptions, but we'd love for you to first start with removing adoption barriers. There are many in your shelter, like so many shelters we visit. what happens when we lift these adoption barriers? We have seen it over and over. You heard me tell Cameron's story. She had lots of adoption barriers. She wasn't saving a lot of cats. A few years later, she's saving 1,200 cats a year with no shelter. 1 cage and 11 pet supermarket stores. We were at a shelter in Indiana. We're like, you guys realize you're putting up all these barriers? And they said, geez, we didn't even realize we were doing that. And out of the gate, a month later, the very first month after our consult, they said, we just can't believe it. We tripled adoptions. We never did higher adoptions before. We did this again in another shelter. This one was in Wyoming. They called us a couple months later. We're adopting more than we ever had in our 80-year history. We're like, wow, it's a miracle. But this is what happens when we welcome and trust our community members who are coming to us. In your facility right now, it is run by the sheriff's office. I can promise you that if somebody has a warrant for their arrest, or if they are some type of criminal, they are not going to your shelter to adopt. And if they are, I don't think they're that intelligent. They probably would have been caught already, right? So think about this in the big picture. I am somebody who wants to adopt a pet. Why am I being treated like I'm already a criminal? I'm not picking on your office because we see this frequently. We see adoption contracts, applications with the first question. Have you ever been accused or convicted of animal cruelty? Well, what? No. These are people that are coming to your shelter or adoption agency because they want to help and because they want to save an animal. And what's happening is our brains in animal welfare, because all our Facebook feeds are the same. We see the cruelty, we see the neglect, we see the abandonment, we see the injuries. When somebody comes to adopt, we are transferring those people who are committing those acts against animals. We are trying to convince ourselves that, these people coming to adopt might be those bad people, so we're going to try to prove that they're not, right? I ask you to please release that judgment. These are two distinct populations of people, typically. We want to make the right match. We want to have follow-up. So lots of shelters now do the follow-up with volunteers. So we also don't know any shelters that are, oh gosh, we have so many staff, we don't know what to do. That doesn't happen either. What happens, the magic happens when we have public-private partnerships with volunteers, and volunteers come in and are part of the whole picture, whether it's adoption, play groups, all of it, you name it, foster volunteering, advocating on social media, taking cute videos, all of that matters. And when we realize, again, those of you who heard the presentation, when Best Friends did that survey, most people who went to those breeders and pet stores that we are judging, right? They already tried to adopt. I went to the #1 vet school in the country, and 3 of my classmates told me they were denied adoptions, all in different states, different adoption agencies, nonprofit, animal welfare agencies. I was embarrassed by that because we're all crying boo-hoo, our shelters are crowded and nobody wants to adopt this. Oh, why doesn't anybody want to adopt that cat? That cat doesn't like to be held, and that cat doesn't like other cats. So my question is, have you met a cat? Because they typically don't like to be held. Typically, I mean, all of mine are perfect and love to be held, but typically they don't like to be held. Typically they don't want to be confined looking at other cats they don't know. So, we are often our own worst enemies. So when we talk about how are we going to increase adoptions at your shelter, we got you covered, because there's all kinds of different ways that this is going to happen. It is not going to take long, and we're excited to see what happens next. Not only did those 8 cats get transferred to Nashville Humane today, you returned 3 dogs to their owners and did 5 dog adoptions. So kudos, right? That's amazing. But point being, when people come in, we want it to be a good experience, and this is where you're headed. Partnership, transferring to other organizations who are maybe doing adoptions quicker, or specialty breed rescues that can help get those purebreds out, all of these things. We never want to hold animals back. It's first come, first served. So we don't want to say things like, well, we think we can adopt them out, so we'll hold these back, even though we had a transfer placement opportunity. No, we're public and animal safety. We're not here to be a pet boutique. And how many of us want your shelter to be empty because everyone was helped? That's what we want. Yes, thank you, Chief, for raising your hand. That's ultimately what we want, because everyone was helped, just in a different way. And so asking our communities to foster is a great way to do that. And here's what I hear. Well, not here, I'm saying in other places. Well, we've asked our fosters, and we can't get anybody else. But you know what? They're asking their fosters. They're asking their small group over and over and over, the same small pool of people, instead of opening it up to everybody. In Jacksonville, at the city shelter, they sent 2 foster coordinators, sent about 300-400 animals to foster care a year. At a point, more than a decade ago now, that they no longer euthanize for space, they, as Good Samaritans, were bringing in those strays. They said, wait, could you foster instead of bringing them in, and we have a mega adoption event coming up, could you help us? In 1 year, that team of 2 people sent 3,000 to foster. How did they do it with the same 2 people? Technology, easy communication, and at that time, Jacksonville developed what's called mega adoptions, and they invited all the rescue groups and shelters, and they would have these events 4 times a year at the fairgrounds, and guess who they would have? The same animals from the shelter, the same dogs that were there for months and months getting passed by, gets adopted day 1. Cameron, 1,100 or so was the average number of adoptions on those weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And my point is, the reason they could do those foster numbers is they had those live outcome machines already. It's not to go to foster and get stuck, but hear this. If somebody fosters and they want to adopt, this is what we say: hallelujah. We don't say, oh no, that's a foster failure. No, you have to bring them back so that we, can get them in a home so you can keep fostering. No, we move on. Congratulations. Hope you keep fostering, but that's a successful adoption. You have hundreds of thousands of people in your community. You have plenty of people to foster, but people just don't know how to help. So we have to make sure that we make it easy, we make it barrier-free, and Maddie's and ASPCA will tell you foster is the pathway to adoption, and in my heart, it's the better way. I want a pet in foster as opposed to waiting in the shelter, and this is how our industry is transitioning to a community-based foster system. Does that sound familiar to any of you rescue groups? the definition of rescue. So now we need to make sure that you're supported and funded to continue to do that work. So that's really important too. We want to have empty shelters. There's also some models where the fosters would take them home at night and they come during the day, so because they know they're going to have adoption numbers or things like that. Cameron, what did I forget? Anything in my more than 10-minute summary? Okay. Okay, so I'd just like to open it up to the ad hoc committee to see if you have any questions.
If you guys will just push your button if you want to ask a question, and I'll try to keep it in order. The one question I had was, in your tour, did you discuss things that were immediate things that we could change and implement? I'm sure the public's going to want to know next steps for the things that were suggested. Is there anything that's on the horizon that's low-hanging for easy fixes that we can talk about tonight that has been talked about at the animal control?
Yeah, there are lots of fixes. So vaccination on intake is non-negotiable, but what we also have to do is look at your Veterinary Practice Act and the state law with respect to the sheriff's office purchasing those vaccines. So that's one of the high-level things that we need to make sure happens. But again, we need to do more research about your Tennessee state statute. But one big thing that can happen right now is just this conversation about those cats. Those cats are not lost, so we're not actually going to take those cats into the shelter. We need to make sure they stay in place as long as they're not sick or injured or in danger. So there are lots of low-hanging fruit that we're talking to the chief about that we hope can happen quickly, because they're not going to require additional staff, and it's things that we can do, especially getting that information on the website, because remember, this is how it's worked in this community. People are taking those cats that I'm using found in bunny ears because they're not lost, right, to the shelter. They're stealing cats and taking them to the shelter. So when I get to the shelter, you're going to tell me this is your policy now? Well, I just looked online and I didn't see anything. So that's important. We want to set the staff up for success, right? So we want to have this basic information on the website for people to understand that is not here's what we do take and here's how we work. So yeah, there's several things. One is what we did today with the lieutenant and the team is make sure as many animals were in the adoption area as possible. So when people come in, unfortunately, your shelter was built like a lot of shelters and by that I mean there's in the back. We're no longer designing shelters within the back. Because when people come to adopt, we want them to see everyone, whether you're on a stray hold or not. You have a great return to owner rate for dogs. It's 40%. 22% is the national average, so that's amazing, but it still means 60% of the time I have to find a placement for that pet. So I do not want to miss an adoption opportunity. So making sure in your facility, the way it's designed now, is everybody's in adoption. So I think all the cats now are in adoptions because so many were transferred. Thank you to the rescues who pulled in the last couple of days. There are no cats in intake, right? No cats in cat intake right now. And that's important because there's nothing more heartbreaking to me than to have somebody come to the shelter and there is their perfect match somewhere that they'll never see. That we can't have that. So that's simple, that's already being done.
Go ahead, Don.
Sorry, it's my first
Just
time
the
pressing.
middle
Oh, the
blue
middle
one.
one. Okay. Oh, blue. Sorry about that. Again, I want to thank you so much. You've been a joy coming here to Sumner County. You all have been so wonderful.
Thank you.
The amazing things that you're reporting with just one day is just incredible. So that gives us so much hope that we can be a beacon here in Sumner County and really truly getting care in animal control. But I love the fact that there's a preventative. It is avoiding intakes at all possible, getting all of the check marks in line to have them not be in shelters, because that's not really shelter. And I think it's fabulous that you said that it's really getting to a situation where it's a foster system versus a shelter system, which is kind of a misnomer as we learn. You did speak about, which I've heard routinely as I've done some of my research as well, and the robust spay and neuter, and kudos to our spay and neuter clinic in Sumner County for their exceptional graphics. I've seen it firsthand. Approximately, if we're going to be looking, because there's going to be a budget situation as well that's forthcoming, I'd like to find out, and I'm not holding you to, but just like an average of what is required for a robust spay and neuter program, and to really implement that in our community.
Yeah, that will be included in there. And remember, your nonprofit has made that happen. So if you look at the graph from over the years, as a matter of fact, it's going to be included in our presentation. So your numbers from your spay neuter clinic are going to be in our presentation. So the nonprofit has been carrying that burden. But we do have a formula that Peter Marsh, who did the research on this, looked at correlation, and it is 5 subsidized surgeries per 1,000 people. And those are subsidized targeted surgeries, like we talked about, for people who can't afford otherwise to get their pets sterilized, for your cats that have access to the outside, certainly for large dogs, but it should not include your small breed dogs, but because of, they're not at risk like large dogs, but those numbers will be included in the report.
And I have just a couple more questions. I know that we would like to do things relatively immediately that are the low-hanging fruit,
Yes.
which our chairman has pointed out. And I was hoping, and maybe this can happen pretty quickly, are the Q&As at intake. That seems to me intuitively that once that even happens, to even prevent them from coming in, that our team that's, and Lieutenant Tarlacki, he's just really amazing too, and they have a love of pets, in my experience, going over to animal control. Will they be armed with that particular Q&A model? I'm assuming you have a boilerplated model of what great looks like at intake, so that we can see this 80% reduction pretty relatively quickly, because that's an easier fix. It's training them to say, hey, this is a new intake questionnaire that we're going to use from day one forward.
Right, but Donna, I would also say, more importantly than that, is the information on the website, and we're going to give you some great examples, because people are going to your website for information first. When they don't get that information, they're going to take the day off work, they got to get a babysitter, now they're at the shelter, and you're like, what? You're like, no, I did all this to get here, and now you're telling me this is your policy. It's so helpful to have that information on the website. It will become the culture in your community that, okay, well, we have to make sure, we recommend that animals are posted on home to home for a month before they would be considered in any shelter, nonprofit or municipal, and I feel very strongly about that, especially with a municipal shelter. I wanted to also, something I didn't say about the importance of that, and why, besides the trauma for animals to be confined, no different than people, and the trauma we suffer, is that oh my gosh, I forgot my train of thought. Is that you're a public and animal safety entity, And the sheriff is sometimes faced with a murder case, with a cruelty case, and you have 90 animals that you need to have room for. So this makes sure that you will have space to handle the emergencies, which by definition you can't plan. So ironically, we have called this system animal control, and we've never had any control. It has always been this mass influx of animals, and it's only now in the last 5 to 10 years that we are calling it managed coordinated intake for that reason. We need to make sure that we are available for those emergency situations.
Well, it's really a paradigm shift has to happen because we see this and now it's a shift.
Right.
But in the interim, because it's really not on everybody's radar, or there's less of a push out of the intelligence into the community, and maybe there's some opportunity for PSAs to inform people that you need to come to the website. Sometimes there's a Slack as a stopgap of where do I go, how do I do that? And maybe there'll be some assistance in getting that out to the community, because there is a lack of knowledge, even myself here, until I got really knee deep into it and the awareness.
And can I just speak to that? So while I agree, I would say do not fund any of that, because you have hundreds of thousands of people in this community. You only have 1,000 animals last year going into your shelter. So it's more people need that information when they have a problem or they need something from your shelter. And so that interaction is going to be that one-on-one or the website or a phone call. So don't think about this, I have to educate hundreds of thousands of people, because they will never interact with your sheriff's office or your shelter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah, just thinking about big picture.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm a big advocate of funding. It's not education, it's, hey, did you know we have this subsidized spay-neuter program? That's the education.
Right.
We have a service for you. Yes.
That's perfect, because that's one of the things that you definitely have talked about, which I think is very helpful. And what I find fascinating is you had two people on a team that did 3,000 to foster.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
Boggles the mind.
Boggles the mind, and it tells you the efficiency of just two people.
Technology.
Yeah, the technology and use of, and getting the right people in the right position that know how to, and I'm assuming is that, will there be recommendations on the appropriate type of people, skill sets that would be appropriate? You'll provide maybe some guidance if you're seeing some, how would I say, stopgap, or some people really don't have a lot of the skill sets that they may not be in the right position to do certain things because they may not have the ability to do a lot of the IT type stuff, or how they're going to do it. So will you be able to maybe kind of give pointers on how to create that type of dynamic where we can get those fosters? Is that maybe also inclusive in intelligence?
I can answer it right now. Is you want people that are dedicated to the mission, and you can train them, as long as they're willing, unless they're, youngins, they're the experts with the IT, but willing to be trained on that system. But no, you want people that are dedicated to the mission. I don't care if you were a foster care coordinator before. I don't care if you were a rescue coordinator before. We laugh because we've been with directors in, Applebee's, and the waitress is awesome, or the waiter will like, hey, you ever think about working at the animal shelter? Because their customer service was stellar. So it's really more about that and training people up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's pretty much, because I'm eagerly awaiting your report and kind of eager to get started, especially with the one-day success that we're seeing. So again, I want to thank Maddie's too. You guys have been amazing, and I really appreciate y'all and y'all for coming.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyd.
Dr. Sarah, I want to say thank you. This has been wonderful. Your presentation has been captivating. And I want to give you an opportunity. You have an audience here to tell us how we can contribute to Maddie's or some of the other organizations that fund your work.
Oh, you're so sweet. thank you. Do not give to Maddie's fund. I think they're worth like $378 million. They don't need your money, really. What we would love is for you all to thank Maddie's on social media. So please, Maddie's Million Pet Challenge, say thank you for sending Dr. Pisano and Cameron and having the mentorship program, because the mentorship program is important to Maddie's to raise up the next generation. So that's how you can repay us and contribute, is to say thank you to Maddie's. Yeah, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you can always start a Sumner County Spay-Neuter Fund to supplement your surgeries. I know somebody who might be able to help with that.
Yes, yes. Yes, everybody say how much they're going to contribute to Maddie's and give it to one of your nonprofits. Spay-Neuter.
That's a great idea. So I want to direct a question towards our representative from the Sheriff's Department, but I understand if you don't know, that maybe she can answer because it's all fresh, new information just learned in the last day or two. You had talked about using the website to make the most of the experience that people are going to have coming in. Are you guys prepared and okay and ready to do that? Like, do you have the people it takes to make the changes that they're offering, or is there more help needed there for that?
Mr. Chairman, on that, we have one IT person assigned to the Sumner County Sheriff's Office, which is Dwayne Leaks. I think the sheriff has requested more IT, but they created a IT department at the county, and through that, help was offered there. The sheriff has special needs, and so, like I said, that's why the county elected to do it to start with. If we can task the county IT to assist, that would be great. But we're talking budgetary. This is from my viewpoint, is that the sheriff's office desperately needs additional IT at the sheriff's office so we can concentrate on our websites and things and not have to wait on county IT or another organization in order to do that. So that's a funding issue. I'm sure Chief Craddock would be able to expand on that. But our current IT director works his fingers to the bone and has so much stuff. So that's a good question, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you bringing it up.
So I'll inquire with our county IT department. It sounds like it's about bandwidth and checking with their capabilities, and if we need to add somebody to that, or seeing, just how much they can take on. But I'm all behind the idea of what you suggested about getting a website to prepare people for how to bring in or not to bring in animals. The other question I had, and it's also a dual question, is a couple months ago we asked for policy and procedure current, and that was being collected, and I think it was in the middle of being renovated, and then this opportunity came about, so naturally we all pushed the pause button on that to make the best practices be the current procedure if we can, or get as close to that. Is that something that Dr. Pisano's going to help you guys finish and fulfill? Do you have like a timeline on that to know when we can see some of these changes actually put into policy, just so the public is aware of the kind of changes that we made?
Yes, sir. It's my understanding also that that is, our policies are we're going to be available to the doctor to review what we're doing so far and to make recommendations on what's needed to be changed in order to be in line with the current practices. My understanding that is happening or going to happen again. Chief Craddock would be able to answer that since he is firsthand on it.
And I can answer that, yes, that's part of our program. helping updating the SOPs.
So I'd like to put that on the agenda for like maybe 2 months, maybe just to check in to see where we're at with that. Is that a fair amount of time to look back at it?
That's fair, yes.
Because I know you were going to do a report and that's
Right.
sometime the next month.
Right,
And then maybe we'll have a solid policy procedure
Yeah.
update by then. Okay, I just wanted to follow back on that.
yeah. And the other thing we encourage shelters to do is, let's not wait till we have perfect SOPs. That's okay. We encourage shelters, don't wait until you have a perfect SOP to do something. You know, God, let's train everybody, let's do it. Like, we'll get it on paper, but this is the policy. And when I started in Miami and there weren't any, I was writing memos all the time, you know, so at least, okay, we have to start. So it's just important to start and not wait till you have a perfect leader.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the big thing that we find is the veterinarian and the need to have one and maybe an assistant, full-time veterinarian. And I know there could be a search, probably statewide, you know, throughout the country search. How far in advance, again, it's probably a budgetary thing, you'll probably help us with, this is the money we have, this is where we can appropriate it. We may have the monies and we might not be using them as wisely, but there might be ways that are, depending on what our outcomes are going to be, and that's going to be in the report. And then to start looking, are we to, like I know you're saying, don't wait, which I agree, before you get stuff etched on paper, do these policies and practices ahead of time before the paper gets done and etched in that. So when should we start? Because it may take time to put out feelers for a full-time veterinarian.
Yeah, and when we look at the landscape of your whole organization, that is more on the back burner as opposed to the low-hanging fruit that we know we can create change and get these things done, because it will take so long to find even a part-time veterinarian. So that's something we would love to see you use what was designed as your spay-neuter space by the Sumner Spay-Neuter Clinic in the past. That would be amazing, but we got too much low-hanging fruit. Like, let's get through those things first. You're going to see such an enormous difference, and you're going to see your needs that will change a little bit too. So that's not our first priority. Yeah.
Dr. Pizzano, would you be okay to take a few questions since we do have some time left over from the public?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead first.
Thank you. Yeah, just to address the low-hanging fruit, just so we'll know that, and there's numerous things that's been mentioned in my low-hanging fruit, vaccination upon intake. Sarah has assisted us in the past in providing things to assist on that. So that, I see that as a low-hanging fruit. Cats not being taken into the shelter unless it's medically necessary, things of that nature. That seems like that's a very low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely.
That's just a simple change in how we do things. Website, that's a low-hanging fruit, even though we don't have the current personnel, but I think we've got enough resources that we can be able to make some changes on that pretty quickly. So I see that as a low-hanging fruit. The Q&A upon intake, low-hanging fruit. That's a symbol of educating, showing our personnel there the questions to ask and how to ask them. So that's a low-hanging fruit. And that goes to management, coordinate intake. That's what you're doing with all that. So all those are low-hanging fruit. Then we get to the subsidies, which recognition five procedures per 1,000 personnel of citizens.
Correct.
Okay. That's a budgetary issue there that may be able to handle this upcoming budget. It just depends on that, and that's where our county commissioners to also take a look at. The vet situation, just to tell you about that, I know Chief Craddock and the sheriff has requested funding for a full-time vet in this next budget. And like I said, giving what you have told us before, minimal is $140,000. And then you do full-time and stuff, like I said, there's some other benefits that will be probably going along with that also. That's kind of a huge thing. We need it, no two ways about it. Williamson County, I think they've got a full-time vet plus 2 assistant vets. But that again is a budgetary issue that the county commission is going to have to look at and try to come up with funding. Another low-hanging fruit is your foster program. I think that's something that can be started tomorrow. The reason I say that is you do have certain people that want to foster, and they're readily available. So that's something I think that can be looked at and addressed as a low-hanging fruit. Again, we're going to management intake again. So all those things are several right there. There's several more on your report that I'm sure will be forthcoming. I personally know that the Sheriff's Office is very excited to have y'all here, to hear these recommendations. And I think once we start getting these in place, I think the community will start to smile more and become more a part. And I think some of the frustration or misinformation from time to time, I think you'll see that start to subside. And that's through communication and helping. So we appreciate you and your time. I know it's pro bono, that Maddie's just taking care of it, but it's just a good step in the right direction for Sumner County as a whole. We appreciate you. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Lieutenant. And I want to say, so just on that foster note, that is, the program is simple for sure, but we also have to make sure that we have guidelines and somebody over that, which ideally would be a volunteer to start out. So because those programs do have to be managed. So again, we want to make sure we're being thoughtful and strategic about how we roll things out, but I would definitely want to advocate for a volunteer until there were additional staff, because your staff is working hard and your trustees are working hard and they're doing a lot of different jobs. So we want to keep them happy, and but there's lots of people that want to volunteer and help. So what a great volunteer position.
Dr. Pisano, so when we first started this ad hoc committee, one of the first things that came to my attention and a few other commissioners and members of the committee about the need for a vet, because we saw that there was they were only coming once to twice a week. And after talking with you and hearing your presentation and speaking with you a little bit after the meeting the other day, I'm rethinking, is that necessarily the best route to go after first, and a need for a vet first? It seems to be so many other things now that we can do with the reduction of intakes. We're going to need a vet even less than we did before, and I'm questioning my first line of thinking with going after that. Is there vet techs or things that we could do to get more animal care out of the money we're spending versus go straight after a vet right now for full time? Could you speak a little bit about that, or am I misunderstanding?
No, that's exactly what I was saying. Yeah, that I was agreeing with that earlier. That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Could you expound upon that a little bit more so that we all understand that, the public understands that, the Sheriff's Department understands that, so that we're all thinking along the same lines with what to do with the allotment of money that we have right now? This whole animal improvement goal of this committee was first started to make most efficient the funds that are available to us at this time, with room to grow in the future to make things better and expand the budget later. But we wanted to make sure that we were doing the most efficient things with the budget that we currently have.
So one of the things I'm going to take that I did not mention is a basic physical exam. And almost anybody can be trained to do a basic physical exam. All you have to do is recognize and be trained normal versus abnormal, his eyes shut. I'm not asking anybody to diagnose that, but his eyes shut. So that means, wait a minute, that's somebody that needs medical. So the team, and as you do develop more staff, you want them trained to, all of them, even the trustees included, to recognize abnormalities, because everyone on the team should be part of medical surveillance. And so again, 1,000 animals in 2023 around, you're going to see that drop dramatically. So I wouldn't put the veterinarian as high priority and tie up that money knowing that we have shelters waiting for years to find veterinarians. And so it's not likely that that would be something that we can resolve right away, but medical surveillance and getting that pet to the veterinarian is something that I think is a more practical approach for you right now. So that's how I would think about the medical care. They need the care, and the team can absolutely be trained to recognize when that should happen.
One of the main reasons I wanted to see this started was because there was so much disease in this shelter.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that the sheriff's department has always kind of stood by is the 3 to 5 day stray hold, and they didn't vaccinate until that was up, because they felt like it wasn't theirs to vaccinate. So, you know, where do you stand on that? You know, in our shelter, we vaccinate.
Yeah.
But, so even more disease comes in. So that was kind of concern. And the other thing, if you want this to be a community shelter and everyone involved, when we have trustees, again, how do we do that? Because they can't really have volunteers if they have trustees, so.
Right. So, okay, so disease, not vaccinated, these are not my recommendations. This is a national standard. Everybody gets vaccinated on intake. Whether you're going to get held for 3 days, but you are a very aggressive dog, I know your outcome is going to be euthanasia, but I can vaccinate you. You know, somebody holds in the front and I get them in the back. So that means, because you're going to have herd immunity, right? So it doesn't matter if they're pregnant or they're sick. You want everyone vaccinated on intake. That is the only thing that we can do to start providing that immunity. So that's a blanket recommendation, absolutely.
Right, but I think they felt like it was a lot.
Right, but that's why I'm telling, that's why I'm saying the recommendation is to vaccinate on intake, as do many of all the big shelters in Tennessee and many shelters in Tennessee. The second thing is, when you decrease intake, remember right now you're twice over capacity for dogs, and what we're told is that's the norm. So we have appropriately designed dog kennels with the divider door that should only be closed during sanitation, but because we have so many dogs staying with us, the divider door is closed. Now those dogs have minimal space. That is stressful. That reduces their immune system. Now I'm more likely to have disease. Overcrowding is the major risk factor for disease. Length of stay is a major risk factor for disease. What we're talking about with these recommendations, those are all, everything I just said, those are all symptoms, and those are all why we need to keep animals out of shelters, and if they come in, get them out quickly. But the vaccine is the only tool we have. It's not 100% right out of the gate, but every single infectious disease specialist will tell you, they start building that immunity, they must be vaccinated and intake. That's cats and that's dogs, and kittens and puppies. And guess what? The University of California and Wisconsin just came out with new recommendations. You're vaccinating newborns. Yeah. In a shelter. I mean, that's, you know, not the real world, but in a shelter. And then the second thing was the trustees. So I love the program and having trustees, but it must be blended with the mission of, yes, public and animal safety, but getting animals out of the shelter quickly. And so how does that happen? You have the risk of inappropriate behavior or things being passed that shouldn't be passed to trustees. So the idea would be that their schedule is 8 to 3, and then at 3, that's when your adoption program starts, say 3 to 7, and you have volunteers come in 3 to 7. Right now, most people work during the day, and your adoptions are closed at 4. So when again, another barrier to getting animals adopted. So that, I think, is a nice compromise of having the best of both worlds. And those staff, and this is the recommendation, is to add those couple of staff so they're doing a variety of things. And they're doing the foster program, they're doing adoptions, they're training volunteers to help do adoptions and spot clean and do play groups. So, there is a way that you can have the best of both worlds.
Go ahead, Tom.
And as we speak, I get more questions, so I do thank you for that opportunity. I think it's really also a good idea what you were saying about medical surveillance. And also there may be some other opportunity where I call cross-training. So now you have a staff that's all on the same page. They all have all of this training, so that's really a beautiful thing because they can all step in where there's like, oh, I don't know how to do that kind of moments. So I think that's wonderful, and I'm assuming that that's going to be also part of the report and the how-to. We're going to have maybe how-to guides and stuff like that because we're working a little bit blindly. But my colleague over here, Mary, who's amazing, she said something which is really sometimes we overlook the obvious. You know, we have human food banks. Why not pet banks where you have a different array of support because you have people that may not be able to afford their pet and they don't want it to surrender, but they feel they can't feed them appropriately, give them the care they need. Are there ways and abilities to implement, or where can we put those types of pet food banks? I don't know if you're familiar about how to implement an idea that was fielded through this committee.
You're already getting donations of food. You're lucky to have a pedigree feeding program for dogs. For cats, the food is purchased, but you are already getting donations of pet food and dog food that you can't feed because of a contract with pedigree. So it already is in place. So some shelters have drive-through hours where you can come every day between 4 and 4:30 and pick up the food you need. Some partner with your Meals on Wheels, with your feeding programs for people, with social services. So for me, I know my shelters and I know most shelters, man, we're always strapped for staff and time, and we're overwhelmed with the amount of our work. I'm always looking for partners to see who can relieve, who can I partner with. So social services is a great one. Meals on Wheels, years ago, realized that people who were in need of food, that had food insecurity, were giving the food that was delivered to them to their pets. And so now Meals on Wheels does have an animal pet food program as well, so that they address both of those issues. So I would say, what other departments in the county have social service programs and can help pets, pet owners that need it?
And maybe we can, maybe we can get some of that implemented on the website, especially if people are coming, and maybe have a really bold or information on what we can do to help you stay with your pets. I think that would be really critical because, again, you're going to keep people from getting into it.
Right. And what we're told, your food donations go up and down. Sometimes you don't have any. Sometimes you have them. Right now, you have a lot of donated food, right? So we want to get that out. So it would just be Facebook posts and social media like, hey, come pick up the food. And even if it's in one certain location, right, you want to look for programs and things and strategies that don't add workload to your staff. So if it can be a self-serve, all the better.
Dr. Pisano, a statement was made by one of our community members about the current procedures with intake and vaccinations. And I want to be fair to our sheriff's department, but I ask you this question. that they weren't vaccinating upon intake between the 3 to 5 day period of time or whatever. And I want to ask you, is that something where state law and allowances kind of conflicts with best practices? Has there been an evolution on that since back when they did that up until now? Standards are that you do vaccinate, and that's what the goodness of this meeting is to update current practices. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't want to paint them in a bad light by, if they were doing something that is fully appropriate and acceptable at a certain time, but things have evolved and changed with that. Could you speak a little bit about that?
I will, and I'd also like the lieutenant to speak to it as well. But so there are state statutes that have been interpreted like that, and no offense to municipal attorneys anywhere, but sometimes if the animal is designated as property, they say, oh no, you can't touch that property. So there's few state laws that address specific shelter practices, and a lot of it's subject to interpretation. And so, there's never been a shelter that I know of that was sued for vaccinating animals on intake. Most of these animals come in with no identification. If they have a microchip, it's not accurate. So, but if you want to add anything to that, Lieutenant?
You're correct. The sheriff's office had that policy in effect because in the state of Tennessee, the animals are considered property. And until that property, as a result, 3 to 5 day wait, until that property becomes the sheriff's office or the shelter's property, then the opinion was that we don't do anything until it becomes ours. Given the fact of, like I said, the changing of best practices and things that should be done, it is your recommendation, and like I said, it has been a thing that goes all across the United States, that shelters vaccinate on intake, then I think we're going to be good because we're going after the best practices. And again, you said no one's been sued. My understanding is, and a question for a vet, or you're the vet, as far as if the animal has just had its vaccination and stuff, is it going to harm the animal, cause any harm or anything to the animal?
Yeah, great question.
I think it's probably not.
Right, great question. So you're correct, there is no case law, and it is absolutely non-negotiable. And then there is a wide safety of margin of safety with vaccinations. There are occasionally animals that will have a vaccine reaction no matter what, but the risk of not vaccinating because you don't know if they were vaccinated before is far lower than the risk of infectious disease. So it's not anything, could it happen? Yes, they could have a vaccine reaction for the first time, and the owner wouldn't have known that. So it's not anything that we need to worry about.
Is there any more questions from the committee members? Because I'm going to turn it over to the public if anybody has any questions. You guys are okay with that? Okay. So if you have any questions, just step up to this microphone right here if you want to ask any, and just keep the questions short. Is there anybody with questions? Just keep the questions short. Don't develop 5 minutes or you then ask a question, and just so that everybody has a chance to ask. But push the middle lower button.
I just wanted to say thank you to the ad hoc committee and the sheriff's department for contacting you. I started attending these meetings in November, and at that time it was all just about all of the problems. And now it's just been a dramatic shift to some solutions, which is great. And so I'm hopeful for our community and the sheriff's department working with the community. The only question I had was the sheriff's department, that you're going to present everything to the sheriff's department, and then I imagine you'll start implementing some things, and how will we as a community know that these things are taking place? Will it be on like the Facebook page, or, I think as a community, we want to know, we want to see the changes that are taking place, because they all sound really promising and good.
So I'll address that one. When Dr. Pisano presents her report, I encourage all you guys to stay involved with this committee process. We don't plan on cutting it off anytime soon because that will be the follow-up to see the citizens be satisfied with the end results. We don't want to just stop it because somebody says they're going to do something. We want to see those procedures be updated and get current and do best practices and show the public that changes were made. And the last question that I asked that gave Lieutenant Matthews a chance to speak to was a good example of what I want everybody to remember, and the fact that I don't think there's any nefarious activities going on with anybody. It's just about current best practices versus best practices from last year or the year before that or a decade ago. Whichever ones we're following, they were all good at one time, but at the job that I do, my regular job, we do continuous improvement. And I think that's where you as the public needs to stay involved, keep the commissioners involved of questions and concerns, and then it's our job to do continuous improvement and ask for things like this, and everybody wins if that's the case. So please stay involved.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
And you're saying updates, that's just another excellent thing for our website. And when a website is done properly, then those updates can be shown on their website. So I believe all that can be taken care of that way.
Yeah.
Thank you, like everyone has said. This is just something that I've been coming to several of these meetings, and just now talking about the vaccination, I didn't really understand the situation. So I guess I was just wondering, with vaccinations and with the spay and neuter, what the barriers are. So it sounds like with the vaccinations, there's not really a barrier having the vaccination. It's not like we need a vet to administer it. Somebody else can do that. So it's really just that policy with that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And the only thing is the rabies needs to be done by a veterinarian, but everything else can be a layperson. Just
What?
the rabies
Just rabies.
would have to be given by a veterinarian, but all the other vaccines can be given by a layperson.
And the rabies is for adoption, right? Or is it planting?
For adoption, yeah, when they leave is fine. That's what most.
Scheduled.
Yeah, that's when most, I mean, if shelters have veterinarians on staff, they might get rabies on intake or while they're there, but most of them get it at surgery and on their way out.
Okay, and then the same sort of question with spay and neuter. I don't really understand. Do we have the ability to do those? Do we have the people in place to do those, the targeted ones you're talking about? Or is that something we need a vet or we need?
Yeah, so there's no on-site spay neuter right now. So right now, if you adopted a pet and they were spay neutered, you're golden. If they need to be spayed or neutered, then that cost is the burden of the adopter, which is what we don't want to see because that's just another barrier. And again, when a shelter takes an animal in, the obligation to that animal is providing the spay neuter. That's not happening right now, but that will be explained in the report and with the associated costs.
Dr. Pisano, that's something that I think this committee is still interested in pursuing, and it was one of the main things that started it also. And I expect in your report, if you could give us some guidance on how to firm up the relationship between our spay and neuter facility and our animal control facility, and what best practices are in your experience with people with communities that have a sheriff's department run animal control, how they do it and how that contract, or is it a contract, what the relationship looks like. If you could include that in your report for a suggestion, it is something that we plan on following up with because it is a concern of ours and a focal point of this committee.
Yes. Can I just add something? I also want to say, there are exceptions, so some animals are getting spayed or neutered before adoption, if they go to the vet's office for something else, so that does happen occasionally too.
Sharon?
Turn yours off.
And then just the one other thing that I noticed come up that was not truly talked about was the building itself. I know we're not going to just tear that one down and get a new one or whatever, but I heard about just issues with like the drainage and things like that. Did you notice anything like that? And is there something that can be done to help that?
Yeah, there is an issue with the drainage in part of the dog kennels that needs to be looked at, but again, when there's far fewer animals coming in, you have the right size kennels, you're going to have portalized cat cages, you have the bones, you don't need a new facility. The drainage is an issue, and it would be great if that could be looked at, but that could be a big ticket item.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for remembering some of the things and raising that from the public comments. I have a quick question with regard to recommendations. Will your report say recommendations and approximate cost? Because what's going to happen as we get recommendations, it would be really helpful if we get an idea, because this will go to, like, we have this amount of funding, we have maybe shortfalling. We really don't have an idea, but again, we wouldn't hold you to it, but it's a maybe national, like if you're doing a table where here's a recommendation and national average cost. I think that would be really helpful to the commissioners, because that will be before them relatively soon. Is it July or something? Is that when you have your budget?
It's going on now.
It's going on now, so this is June. So that would be, I would be extremely helpful, because then we can start looking at, I'll say bang for the buck. This is not very expensive, because again, the drainage is probably going to be, as you said, because that's going to require labor costs, materials, and that's going to be probably a big ticket item. But if we're reducing the intakes, that drainage probably might not be as much of a problem. We don't really know that, because that remains to be seen. So if that's part of the...
It is to the degree that we can. We would always include, pricing,
I'm sorry, it's past my bedtime. I don't know about you all.
Yeah,
I'm
me
not
both.
going along. I have a question. I adopted a dog a year ago from animal control. And you mentioned something a little while ago, the only thing you said about this, and something that I had not heard, and I've been following these meetings for a little bit. You mentioned large, unsafe dogs that were euthanized. The dog that I adopted was on the kill list. I saw her picture, I freaked out, I had to go get her. They had her 11 days, and I don't really know why she was even there at the time. The point is, the dog, when they pulled her out of the back and brought her to me to show, the dog was absolutely freaking terrified. This dog could have easily been, and in fact was, I was told later, was on the euthanasia list, simply because she was terrified. I am not a fancy trainer, I'm not Cesar Milan, but I have had this dog 1 year. She is only an eyelash away from being qualified as a therapy dog. She is fabulous. In fact, Mary even suggested I bring her here tonight. She's incredible. You have spoken some wonderful things. I love this, absolutely, and it makes my heart full. But I'm not hearing the addressing of these aggressive dogs, these frightened dogs, and the dogs that need the help from boneheads like me that have nothing else to do but take on these dogs nobody wants. I have 3 of them. And helping them to assimilate them to where they can get homes and find the right home, so that, and even help people that own the dog so that they don't surrender them because they go potty in the house, or they vomited on somebody's homework, or they ate somebody's car keys. The ways to alter and help these people with their dog's behavior even before they're taken into animal control and so forth. So my question is that being addressed? Are there individuals or groups or trainers that can help people with things like this, so that I don't have to take them all because I can't?
But let me thank you so much for going to the shelter and for taking the one that was in the cute little one with the bow and all of that. So thank you. So I want to integrate everything I said has to do with what you experienced. How can we give people other opportunities? That safety net, did you see training as your dog like jumping on all the neighbors? And again, what can we do to keep them out? Because your dog was terrified, just like my dog would be, just like so many of them are. So that's why it's so important to keep them out of the shelter. And preferably in a foster home, foster on deck. This dog, and talking about how a foster program could happen quickly, that would have helped your dog to get
Well, I
them
asked
out.
about that.
But they don't have it set up now, but that's going to be in the future. You know, that's what we're going to be working towards. What about now? There's less dogs. Now I have a better person to dog ratio. I can do play groups. So your terrified dog that came in, and I was like, what the heck? Now I'm with all these goofball, precarious dogs in the play yards, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good. So every single thing I said, short length of stay, foster care, rescue, don't wait, get them out, vaccinate them on intake so that they don't get sick, you know, all of those things add up to helping prevent what your dog had to go through. And I am one that sticks up for those dogs that, oh, they might be sketchy or what have you, because it is an unfair judgment when they're incarcerated. But what I want you to understand is as a shelter, we don't always have that luxury. We don't always have you. We don't have the luxury to say, oh, well, he bit somebody in the past, but he was just scared. If I adopt out a dog that will go on to bite or, God forbid, attack somebody, and 99% of people get bit, breaking up dog fights, I have to err on the side of euthanasia because that's going to hurt every dog that comes into a shelter after him, and that's why animals need to be kept out of shelters to begin with.
Then what about a designated individual that could come in and with those dogs that, because I was told when I walked in, an official from animal control walked out and said to me, put her hand up like I was a 4-year-old and said, if this dog even looks like she's going to bite you, she's gone. And I put my hands up and I said, put her in the truck. Just, I'm not going to fool with it. Is there a person that is qualified that can come and take the time to say, this dog is probably going to be a fear biter or whatever, but that we can come up with a program to assist this?
That's such a great question. So to me, who's the perfect person? Volunteers to come in and help socialize them and work with them and all of that. But you know what those dogs need? They need to get out. But this is a major issue in shelters today. When I was director in 2005, we were euthanizing healthy animals. So anybody sketchy or aggressive, they were the first tier euthanasia. These are hard decisions because we cannot always tell, is this aggression because you're incarcerated or is this aggression I have to worry about? So it's a really tough, because remember, if we have a bite history and we know it was severe damage or we know it was a serious attack or it killed another animal or something like that, I have information. But 80% of the animals going into shelters are stray, and I don't have that history. But I will tell you that shelters right now today are at risk or are losing their insurance because they're adopting out animals, dogs, that are going on to bite. So it's a tough topic, and I just so appreciate you taking your dog, and you saw that it was situational, thank God. Yeah.
I'm just an idiot. I just took her because she's the cutest damn thing I ever saw in my life. But the point is there a way then to even aftercare, if you have a dog like I took, is there a way to form some kind of a group that would have something such as a brain trust, a support group, that we could all get together and say, okay, this dog might be a nibber, this dog is aggressive with females, this dog doesn't like little ladies, this dog has this property on the leash, and so forth, and get together and have, even after they adopt the dog, so that the adopter has an option and someone to turn to rather than just kill the dog.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so part of safety net is training and all that kind of education.
But people don't know how.
That's
So-
right. There's so you have local trainers here. You know, shelters are struggling to get and find and train people that really, this is again, a very difficult evaluation in an unnatural situation, right? So, but as far as post-adoption, we always advocate for support in terms of, hey, how's it going? We're going to call you a couple of days later. Networking with trainers. You know, in my shelter, we had a group of trainers that were there on standby when there were questions after adoption. There is now, I've never used them, but it's an online training. Does anybody know the name of it? Is it PUP something? It's new in the last couple of years, but it's trainers that help you online just because there was such a huge demand. So there's all kinds of resources, but again, very tough situations and decisions that's really hard in shelters, and thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for all you do, and I'm sorry to keep it.
And your adoption.
So I wanted to take this moment just to speak about that question that she just asked and a little bit about what I learned from you. The goal is to keep those animals out of the shelter, and possibly we could reach out to some of our volunteers and anybody that knows some trainers or people that would work for low cost or pro bono to help people that are in these situations that are thinking about giving a dog up to the shelter because it is aggressive for some reason. Perhaps those people, if you know them, could put some business cards up at the shelter, and then when on intake, when they're asking, you know, why you bring this dog in, and then if they're their wits end and just don't know what to do, maybe they can refer them to a trainer instead of taking them in, and then now it's a challenge for somebody else. So just a thought for those people that may know trainers out there, tell them to bring some business cards up, and maybe the sheriff's department be willing to hand them out.
Yeah, important part of safety net.
I have a question, ma'am. That was very good. I had a just thought. In my work, we have a crisis hotline that you can call for, like, if you're thinking about suicide or whatever. Have you heard of like a crisis hotline for someone who's just fretting over having to give up an animal, and maybe somebody on the other line, volunteers that could take a crisis line for not animal control, I don't like that word, animal assistance, you know, for the human, because the human is the one that's taking care of the animal.
Yeah, and it's typically, it's the shelters in the community. It's either the nonprofits or the public shelters, and that's what the safety net is, so that I can tell you what they do in Memphis. If there is, I have a need, I'm having a problem, I might have to rehome my pet, I don't know what to do, or there is a dog at large. All of those calls go first to the Pet Resource Center staff, and they're the ones that are trying to troubleshoot and help you. So if you don't know about the Memphis programs, we put them in the report. Go visit them. We're so proud of them. We helped them way back when at a very difficult transition, and they're doing great work. And that, what you're talking about, is what the safety net is. And you want, again, people to have that information before they get to the shelter and before they get desperate.
Is there any other questions from the public?
I don't know, this is Maria's.
But my question is, what about cat colonies and feral cats? Or what is the guidelines for that? Should established colonies be kept? Should they be broken up? And if, I think it's spay and neuter, they clip the ear.
Yeah.
What they
Right,
consider
right.
wrong. And we probably have a lot that are turned in, maybe a neighbor doesn't like the cat jumping on its car. So they basically steal them and bring them in because they want them out of their vicinity. But what is the goal? What accomplishments can we do for those cats?
So, and were you here the other night? Did you see the presentation the other
No, I
night?
wasn't.
When you see the presentation, you're going to see this pie graph of the tens of millions of cats that have access to the outside. So our hope is to spay neuter as many of those cats as humanly possible, because we want to reduce the number of cats outside and the number of cats that form colonies or if they congregate, because that's where people and cats get into trouble. So the goal, if there already are established colonies, is to make sure that everybody is spayed and neutered, and making sure that if you're feeding those cats, that it's done respectfully. And what do I mean? I mean, I don't do a drive-by and throw the bag of food out of the car, because that's going to attract wildlife, and again, it's going to cause more problems in that community. So it's feeding the cats in receptacles, it's making sure I'm not feeding in a sensitive wildlife area, it's being respectful of the surroundings, and are there neighbors, am I allowed to feed there? But again, the goal is always spay neuter. We do not advocate for any kind of registration or management of colonies, because what we know is that just drives people and feeders underground. And what we do know works is that when we all work together on making sure those cats get spayed and neutered, that's where we see the most progress. If they do have kittens, taking the kittens, as long as they're not feral, and placing them in homes, not taking them to the shelter, but placing them directly in homes. And if they're feral, to make sure they're sterilized and kept where they already are. With respect to the shelter, what I talk about is the idea that we should not be bringing those healthy cats into the shelter. And you're right, it's one at a time, maybe two at a time. People maybe think that those cats are lost, which they are not. They're fat and happy and know exactly what they're doing and where they're eating. And number two, I don't want the cat on my property. Well, then we have to say, well, what am I doing to attract those cats, and what could I do differently? I am a homeowner, I am a crazy cat lover, but I assure you I would not tolerate a cat spraying on my front door. I also had a pool at my Florida house, and those raccoons, who I love dearly, were using my pool like a hot tub, and they were sitting on the steps, and they were pooping in my pool on the steps. I just about lost it. I'm like, what am I going to do, drain my pool every day? And I was so upset, and my neighbor says, were you going to trap them? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to trap all the birds too. Like, I'm going to trap them. Like, I'm more likely to like take them cocktails, right? So I said to my pool guy, oh my gosh, this is terrible, I'm never going to the pool again. He goes, they don't like snakes, so get rubber snakes from the dollar store. I put the snakes around the steps, and I put something like I forget what I put over this. Guess what? Nobody went in my pool again. I'm a homeowner. I had to do something to stop those raccoons, so it's the same thing with cats. What am I doing? Cameron, that first year, she started this program in Jacksonville. It was not done before, and she was tasked to return the cats after spay neuter to their original location. She was told everybody hates cats, so she went in the cloak of darkness in an unmarked vehicle, afraid she was going to be sniped, and she returned the cats. And 5,400 cats went through this program year one. And guess what Animal Control did to Cameron? They said, we're not taking those complaint calls, we're giving your personal cell phone. And Cameron was shaking in her shoes. And Cameron, year one, 5,400 cats went through this program. Cameron got 12 calls, people. 12 calls. Guess what one call was? My wife is feeding that tiger cat on the porch, and my orange cat needs to eat. And the tiger cat, and Cameron's like, see, I'm a marriage counselor, people. Like, you're feeding your cat, what do you think? Everyone's like, all the possums are eating that food too, right? My point is there was always something that was happening. Of course, this guy thinks like somebody's dropping mail intact cats on his yard, and Cameron's like, that's crazy, who would do that? I mean, this is a dumb answer, I know, who would all do that? But what was happening? He was letting his female intact cat out. That was one of the 12 calls. So, when we don't have that help for people, they're going to bring the cat in, animal control takes the cat, now I'm going to recycle the cat and waste my resources. So the idea is spay neuter, ear tip them or talk to them to identify that they're spayed or neutered. We want to minimize colonies because cats get in trouble when they get together, and make sure everybody's spayed and neutered. But no, if there are colonies out there and people are feeding them and they are not disturbing anybody else, and they were all spayed and neutered, they would stay just like that. And we know cats also like to have their territories, and so they often don't like to have other cats in. There was somebody that had a question, I think, in the back. Oh,
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Specifically about that? You can come on up here and just be in the queue. You be in the queue. So on I heard two conflicting statements that I'm sure I'm mishearing, but so it sounds like the sheriff's department is interested, or the animal control is interested in leaving the cats be and not having people bring in so many cats. But at the same time, where's the opportunity to spay and neuter those cats that are going to be left alone? They've got to come in somehow. How do they get back? Is that part going to be part of the report or plan or whatever?
Yep, and it's in the book.
Okay.
Also, but it's going to be in the report as well. And the idea is that we want to make sure those cats are sterilized for sure. And that's part of why we recommend the municipality funds those subsidized programs, and those cats are part of that program. But the idea is the cat doesn't have to come into the shelter. The cat should go directly to spay neuter. See what I'm saying?
So the citizens that we normally bring them in, the animal control would educate the citizens via website and on entry to please take it over to spay and neuter.
Correct.
And then take it back.
Yeah, and now what has happened in the past is the person says, I'm not taking the cat, no, I'm not taking the cat back, or I'm on my way to work, or what have you. And so there's lots of programs, sheriff's office, police, municipal shelters, where the staff then takes them to spay neuter, and then somebody, it could be a nonprofit, it could be the shelter, it could be a volunteer, puts the cat back in their original location. That looks like anything, but you want to avoid, why are we going to avoid, we don't want to create pathways for more work for ourselves. In Jacksonville, what happened in 2008 when Cameron started this program, the public shelter director said, well, yeah, you can put the ear tip or the ear tip cats back. Well, why can't you put all the cats back? So the spay neuter clinic, out of desperation, said, okay, we'll go to the shelter, we'll pick them up, we'll take them to the spay neuter clinic, and we will return them out of desperation. So that's what happened. Over time, no, they train the community. They don't go to the shelter at all. They go directly to the spay neuter clinic. They pick them up, and they come back and pick them up. And for the ones where people can't take them back, somebody from the nonprofit takes them back. But point being, this looks different in every community, and it can look like anything in your community.
Thank you.
So my question is pertaining to this exact topic. At the shelter, when they end up at the pound, if they're not spayed or neutered, it's upon the person that adopts them, correct? Now, is it possible to have a volunteer, maybe even someone that has a medical background? I'm thinking about myself. I was an RN. Is it possible to take that animal to the spay and neuter clinic, monitor them for 24 hours or however long it needs to be, and then return them to the pound after they've been spayed? So just to ensure that that animal really does get spayed and neutered.
Those are pathways that we'll be talking about and trying to work out. So the ideal situation is every pet is sterilized before they go to an adoptive home. That's always the goal. Shelters like yours that don't have a full-time veterinarian and surgery on site, we gotta figure plan B. And sometimes plan B is you're gonna go home intact. And listen, there's lots of communities where spay-neuter capacity is weeks or months out. So our plan B has to be, you're gonna go home with, a spay-neuter contract, a deposit, etc. But I promise you today, people want to spay-neuter, they really do. And the problem is that in a lot of communities, we can't get it done as soon as we want to. So we're not worried about that, but we are talking and trying to work out those exact pathways that you're suggesting. And when the volunteer program starts, we're going to look for you.
Okay,
So please join us.
she's got it right there.
Go ahead.
I've got a very quick question for you, and since we're talking about adoption and staying and neutering prior to, which is great. I did speak to one of the facilities out in Murfreesboro, and I wanted to get your opinion, which I thought was great, because again, reducing barriers is a key to making sure you can move the animals, get them adopted. So they had implemented especially after COVID, was a $0 adoption, like none, which was amazing too, because everything got so improved, because again, that up front, and what it included was spayed, neutered, and vaccinated pet upon adoption. So I guess my question would be, I think that would be great if we can do that here.
Right.
And would that maybe incur costs, but it may reduce costs later, because as you get, see, that's what the thing is. Sometimes you upfront a little bit more money or whatever costs, but it's really going to offset at the end because of amount of getting them out and less intakes.
Correct. But again, when you are a sheltering organization, public or private, and you take an animal into your shelter, it is your responsibility to make sure that they're spayed and neutered. That doesn't mean I'm doing it on site, but it means I'm providing for it, I'm paying for it. And again, that's why as a municipality, you should be like, oh, we better limit intake, and not limit, but we want to make sure, that's another perk to having less animals in. But if that pet needs to be spayed and neutered, they stay with the owner and maybe they need one of our subsidized surgeries. But the idea is that it is absolutely your obligation to make sure they're spayed and neutered, and you're exactly right, because it's correlated with decreasing intake, decreasing enforcement calls, et cetera, et cetera.
So the $0 is a good idea.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Is there any other questions from the public? Okay, I want to ask one last question, Dr. Pisano. So your report, when do you foresee having that available? The reason why I'm asking is our typical ad hoc animal control committee meetings are the second Tuesday of the month. So that would put it the second Tuesday of May will be our next scheduled one. If you have something available before then, it'd be a good time to do it. I don't want to rush you, but if you're not there yet, I would suggest that we skip May and give you time to make something and have our regularly scheduled one in June. I just want to let the public know about that. What do you think?
Yeah, we will have the report well within 2 weeks, but then we want to have time to meet with Chief Craddock and his team as well. So I think second Tuesday.
Second Tuesday in May.
Second Tuesday in May. I think that's reasonable, time-wise. Yeah, and mind you, it's to discuss, right? There's things that we want the report to be in the chief's hands, knowing like, and we're gonna follow up, and we're still gonna work on this part. That might be the case, but I think that's reasonable. So I would keep your meeting.
Okay, all right. Did you have a quick? Yeah, go ahead.
I know that you have this wonderful book that is the best practice, and I know that there's one book that we have, but we're kind of trying to share, and I haven't gotten access to it yet. Is there any way that we can be armed as an ad hoc committee, even the sheriff's office, And I don't know if that's something that can be helped, either we do a PDF of it, that we could share it, and at least see and be prepared so that we're already up front, being able to read and research, so when we get the report, pretty much prepared for the best practice and reviewing your lovely handbook. So is there any way we can get that?
I've actually got a copy also that, so do we have more than one up here? I'll share.
Okay. Maybe
I have one.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be glad to share it with you. I'm sure you're a voracious reader, you'll probably be able to pretty quick.
Yeah, we can figure it out.
Okay, and the other thing is that would be quicker than the hard copy is it's available as an ebook as well. So that, yeah. It's on Kindle and Apple.
Okay, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we close tonight's meeting?
I want to thank everyone for coming, and to all the groups here. You are so, I just have chills thinking about you all and how dedicated you are and how you've pushed and wanted change and wanted to help the shelter get better. You have been instrumental in getting us here, and we are so excited for you all and to see how things unfold. We're excited to work with the Sheriff's Office, and thank you to all of you for getting us here. We're really excited to be part of your community, and you won't get rid of us now.
Well, thank you so much for coming and doing this for us. We look forward to your report, and hopefully good things are going to continue from here. And I encourage the public to stay involved, and please attend the next meeting in May to see the progress we're making. Please stay engaged. Thank you all for your participation. And there's one motion left to make. Have a second. All in favor?